The Russian Defense Ministry says it has pulled out its troops from the strategically important town of Lyman in eastern Ukraine. And Kyiv says its soldiers have now entered the city. Lyman is in the Donetsk region, one of four that Russian President Vladimir Putin proclaimed to be part of Russia on Friday. The recapture of Lyman by Ukrainian troops is part of a wider counteroffensive that has seen Ukraine retake significant amounts of territory in the east. And our correspondent Nick Connolly joins us now from the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. Nick, Moscow says its troops were withdrawn from this key Ukrainian town. What does this mean for Ukraine's continued advance against Russia?
Well, I mean, that is putting a very brave face on it, and that's something that Moscow has had to do time and time again in recent weeks and months, try to explain away its defeats on the battlefield. It seems like lots of Russian soldiers lost their lives trying to get out on a road that was within range of Ukrainian artillery. This is crucial because this is basically the northwestern entry point to Donbass region. It is not very far away from cities like Lysychansk and that whole region that was so crucial this summer. This is where Russia spent, basically months trying to get these cities. Lots of lives were lost, lots of tech was lost, and now Ukraine is within striking distance of these cities. And obviously it's important in terms of the optics, the symbolism, just a day after Vladimir Putin, annexed these regions and said that Russia was here to stay, that Russia would never leave these territories. Ukraine is proving that it is able to roll back those Russian positions.
Nick, we're getting reports of another attack on a civilian evacuation convoy in Ukraine. What more can you tell us about that one?
Well, that is not very far away from Lyman. It's on the eastern part of the Kharkiv region, near the city of Kupiansk. And it seems like now, based on the most recent reports from the Ukrainian officials, more than 20 people lost their lives. More than half of those are believed to be women and children. And we've seen pretty awful images of cars basically shot up, some burnt out. The Ukrainians are saying that they were shot at from very close range. And as we understand, these are civilians trying to get out who are living in the so-called grey zone, so basically between the Ukrainian and the Russian front lines. And this is a problem that we've had time and time again, where people lose internet access, phone connection, and basically are cut off from information, don't know how to get out, and often leave getting out too late, basically till they can hear the shooting around them, and then end up in very dangerous situations like this. Unfortunately, it seems like this is not going to be the last time we see stories like this.
Nick, thanks so much. That's Nick Connolly reporting from Kyiv. And now I'm very pleased to welcome Alexander Motovsky. He's an author who's written about the origins and strategic behaviour of regimes like Vladimir Putin's. He's also an assistant professor at the US Naval Postgraduate School. But I should add that his views here don't represent those of the US government. He joins us from California. Dr. Motovsky, welcome to DW. Russian forces have pulled out of the strategically important Ukrainian town of Lyman. What will President Putin's response be to this setback, given that his troops are now being pushed out of what he's calling Russian territory?
Thank you for having me. Yes, this is an unprecedented situation, and we could say that Russia is losing the war beyond anyone's wildest expectations. Just as Putin announced the annexation yesterday, some 5,000 of his troops were being surrounded in the area of Lyman. And Vladimir Putin may well be the first leader in history to attempt an annexation while his army is retreating from the battlefield. And also, the annexation is trying to annex territory that the Russian military does not hold and has never held. So it's an unprecedented situation. It is not clear what they will do. And the motivation for the annexation in the first place was primarily domestic. So really to conquer by decree what the Kremlin could not conquer on the battlefield. So the Kremlin had to appease its nationalist core supporters and also provide justification for the mobilization that is done to protect Russian territory, because this wasn't going well with the population, as you might imagine.
So what Putin gained from these annexations is purely an internal sort of PR exercise. Is that right to say?
Yes, more or less. Basically, it was a big show. It was a big rally and a show in Moscow and around the Kremlin, and it didn't do much actually really on the battlefield. The only kind of addition is that it did threaten Ukraine in the west, as the situation on the ground is not going well for Russia. They're really creating this very unprecedented situation in terms of the impact. So this is the greatest challenge to international order since World War II, because it's violating the principle that larger countries are not going to be able to grab territory of smaller countries. And what Putin's threats are doing, it's also not just to conquer, but actually to protect those conquests with nuclear weapons. So success for this scheme is really invitation not just for Putin, but also other potential aggressors to obtain nuclear weapons and to try to repeat that situation.
Could one say at all that the annexation of these regions has now given Putin a reason to declare job's done? And could that make a negotiated settlement more likely at all?
Yes, that's interesting. Again, I have to remind you of the stakes in terms of negotiations. We're definitely some time off away from an end to this conflict. But the annexation actually made it harder for the international community to accept anything other than a complete restoration of Ukraine's territorial integrity. Again, the violation of this principle of inviolability of national borders and no national conquests and our annexations makes it really hard to come up with a formalized peace deal here. In terms of domestically, it will be a very hard sell. Really, Putin is stuck between these very divergent constituencies with divergent interests. So on one hand, he has the nationalists, which have become his core constituency, and they're really pushing for a full-in invasion. And on the other hand, you have the general population, which really doesn't want to participate in this. So it's really torn. It will be a very difficult solution, whatever he pursues there.
Alexander Matovsky, we'll have to leave it there, but thanks so much for your analysis.
Thank you.